and welcome to Tech Tuesday. My name is Danielle Ackle. I'm an instructor over in the Neely School of Business. Today's topic is subtotals in Excel worksheets. Just to make sure our audio is working, if you would please raise your hand in the program. Do so by going up to the top and there's a little person icon with the hand raised. Just click on that. Well, looks like everybody knows what they're doing. Okay, so our audio is working. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go into Excel. Okay, so what you see in front of you is an Excel worksheet. I have entered a bunch of payment transactions, and you'll see the date off to the left, identifying where the payment was made, and then the payment amount. Probably similar to what you may have in a household budget or even a checkbook. So what we're going to do is use this Excel spreadsheet and we're going to show you how to do subtotals. It could be anything from your budget that you may be doing for your department, your checkbook for your household, it could be student grades, anything having to do with numbers that you may want to sort and do some totals rather than doing it all by hand. So let's look at this. As you can see, we have a lot of different places that we have paid, and we certainly have some repeats. The first thing we want to do is figure out how we want this subtotaled. And what I would think is we would want subtotals by payment. In other words, I want to see all the money that I've paid to Tom Thumb and a total for what I've paid to Atmos Energy. So first thing I'm going to do is sort by that transaction detail column. To sort in Excel, since I've got the entire column set up, I can highlight my columns and then come up here to the sort button. When I do this, it allows me to pick what I'm going to sort by. So first I'm going to sort by transaction detail. That's what that column is called. And then I'm going to add a level that allows me to sort by date. So that means it'll group, we can see over here to the left-hand side, target. All of the target transactions will be grouped together, and then within those, it'll be sorted by date. And I could do just about anything here, but this is what I'm going to do for our demonstration. So I'm going to hit OK. And then you'll see it's sorted all the payments. Someone had a very large American Express bill. Then we've got AT&T and Atmos Energy, and it just keeps on going. So if I scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that it's not a full year, thankfully. But we go, how many lines of transactions? 169 lines of transactions. So this is what we're going to subtotal. When we finish, we'll have a subtotal for all of the money paid to the water department and a subtotal for Tom Thumb. So how do we do this? In order to get your subtotals, you're going to highlight the area where all of your data is found. So I started out here. Let me do this again. I'm going to select the bottom right-hand corner, and it doesn't matter where you start, but I'm going to select all my data, pardon me, as I scroll up very quickly. I'm also going to highlight the titles across the top because you'll see that if I don't highlight the titles, it's going to have a hard time asking me what I want to sort by. So I've got the data highlighted. Up at the top on the ribbon, I'm going to go to the data ribbon. That's also where the sort feature is found. Going all the way over to the right, there's a button called Subtotal. So let's look at Subtotal. When the subtotal dialog box comes up, it allows me multiple options. The first is asking me at each change in what? Let's say I wanted to group by date, and I wanted to know how much money I spent each day. In that case, I would say at each change in date. But because I've got it grouped by transaction, by payment, I'm going to select by transaction detail. Then I'm going to tell it to use what function. Because I would like to do a subtotal and actually sum the amounts, that's what I will choose here. And then it's asking me what exactly I want to sum. If I selected date, it would try to add up the dates. Well, that's not going to work for us. We actually need the payment to have a subtotal. It allows me to check mark more than one item. So if I had, let's say, multiple payments or a payment and a discount, I actually could subtotal multiple columns at once. But we don't need a total for the date. We just want payment. So at each change in the transaction detail, that means each time the payee changes, we're going to sum the payment. Now, down here below, it asks me if I want to replace current subtotals, and we're going to keep going over these, so you'll see where that would be helpful to replace the current ones we have. We could add a page break between each of the groups, and this would be helpful if you're creating a report for a meeting. Maybe each of these is a different manager, and so each manager would want their own page where you could hand it out to them. And then do a summary directly below the data. So this means when Amex changes to the next one, before the next one starts, it'll have a total for Amex. Now I could put it somewhere else, but I'd actually like it right below each change in transaction detail. So now that I've got this set up, I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that these things appeared off to the left-hand side, that 1, 2, 3 column. So it looks the exact same so far. If I scroll down, you'll see that when Amex changes to AT&T Mobile, there's my total. And so there's my total for American Express, $8,425. And if I go down to AT&T, there's my total. Because I already had these grouped, it was very, very simple. So what these numbers over to the side mean, this is the detail. I can collapse the data. Right now I've got it on number 3, which is every single line. If I just want to see the totals per transaction, I could click on 2, and it collapses my data. There are my totals by transaction details. Each payee has the total off to the side, and I'm not seeing all the details. That may be very handy if you are responsible for getting all the details together and then someone just wants a summary. You don't have to delete all of the information. You just can collapse it and print it out. And you just have then each of the transaction summaries. And you'll see at the bottom, of course, our grand total that we spent. Now let's say we want to collapse even further. If I click number 1 up here on the left-hand side, then it collapses just down to the grand total. And so even though all my details still there, you'll see I go from row 1 to 185. It's only going to show me. Now if I want it back, I can press 2, and there's my summary again, and then 3 brings me back all my details. That's how quick and easy subtotals are. Well, now let's look at a couple other things that we may want to do. I'm going to highlight those columns again and go back to my subtotal button. Now what I would like to do at each transaction detail change, instead of using the summary, I'm going to say count. And what this is going to do is actually count the number of transactions per payee. So again, I'm going to replace current subtotals. Remember I said that would be important. So that way I don't get multiple subtotals trying to count each other. This will take out my prior subtotals and replace it with the count feature. When I hit OK, now you'll see, let me collapse this for subtotals, we paid American Express 25 times. We bought fuel 23 times. We went to Tom Thumb a Lot for 28 times. And so there is my count. Now I can do this again. I'm going to highlight. I'm going to go back to subtotal, and instead of counting the number of payments, I want the average. And this will give me the average payment to each of those payees. Again, I'm replacing current subtotals up here. I hit OK, and now it brought me all my details back. So if I collapse those just to show you what my subtotals here are. So there's my average, Amex average. And it gives me the average of each time I made a transaction. So very, very quick to use if you are dealing with lots of data. Now, a couple more things I want to show you in that subtotal dialog box. We've already talked about sum and count and average. Well, let's talk about min and max, because you can do that as well. The maximum payment you made, and there again, we're going to collapse that so you can see it. And there is the maximum payment made to each payee. I can do it again and say minimum payment. So the least amount that I paid to each payee. It's going to change it again. I'll collapse it so you can see it. So there are my minimum payments to each. Look at that, Tom Thumb. We must have bought a pack of gum that day. So those are my transactions and what's available in subtotal. And the last one, you can see they just keep going. And if you're familiar with functions in Excel, then you can get creative with those. But I imagine most of us will just use the sum, which is just addition, the number of transaction, the count, the average, the maximum, and the minimum. Now, if I just want all my data to be clean, I can come back to Subtotal and see this button that says Remove All. If I click on it, my data goes back to just each of the transactions. And there's my information, just as good as when I found it. Now, what I've done here below, you'll see that I've created a copy on each of these tabs. It's all the same information, but I did sort that first one. If you would like, you can create subtotals on a tab and then create a copy. So you could have each tab, one showing the count, one showing the average, one showing the summary, so that it's quick and easy to get to. However, you saw what we just did with subtotals. It's really easy to change those out if you just need quick information. If you're doing it for a report, then it may be helpful to copy each of those tabs so you always have it there, especially if you want to email it out to someone. All the information's there, very easy to access. So that's how we use subtotals within Excel. Very easy to use, pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure that when you highlight what you want to use, that you grab those headers up at the top, click on your subtotal, and there's all of your functionalities. If anyone has any questions, you can type it into the chat bar in the bottom right-hand corner. If not, those are the details we wanted to share today. So I'm interested in your comments if that explains everything that you needed, or if you have a question about anything we covered. So Linda asked, can we do totals by month? Absolutely. So what we want to do is sort, and we're going to change this. So instead of doing by payee, we're going to do it by date. Now I've done this, see, we've done it by day instead of by the month. So we may actually have to come in here and add another column. I'm going to say insert column and say month because you asked by the month. So if we did say June, I could just copy June down. Uh-oh, that didn't work. Copy June. And let's say I did July. So here, if we did the subtotals, now that I've got the month in there, I could do my subtotals in change of month. And I want to do the summary of my payments. So if I did that, you'll see, let me collapse this. There's my June and July. And of course, the others I hadn't filled in yet. So that's if we did it by month. But if I did it by day, let's say we do it by date here, because I had each of those transactions was by date, it would give me a total by each day, which may be helpful if you're doing expenses and such, that you'd be able to see it that way. So I'm going to scroll back through here our comments. I hope that answered your question, Linda. Let's see here. So Lori's asking, if you add data after you subtotaled it, do you need to request the subtotal again? All right, so I'm going to clean up. Let's go over here to payments. I'm just going to start my new sheet. And I'm going to sort this page by, like we had it before, the transaction detail, and then by date. Okay, so there's all my data. I'm going to subtotal it. And so at each change in payee, we're going to sum the payment. All right, so let's go down here where we can see a total. So here's my American Express. If I change the number, we watch that Amex total there. If I change that 100 to 200 and hit enter, it changes the total automatically when I change the payment. Now what happens if I add a line? Let's say we forgot a payment here on December 20th. And so we're going to add it. Watch the line after I create it here. If I put in $150, it adds it as well. So as long as I stick it inside of that data, it's going to capture it. So if I insert a line and add it, or if I change one of the numbers, it's going to be there for me. Now, be sure to watch what you're doing, because just as I tell you that it works, then you're going to find a way for it not to work. So we saw here it did work. Just make sure that you review it as you're adding stuff in or correcting it. I'm one who likes to make lots of typos, so I'll always find errors. And as long as I've got it on there, then it'll capture it for us. So any other questions, be sure to type them in the comment section. Looks like we have one more question coming. Oh, just a compliment. You're very welcome. I'm glad y'all enjoyed this. I thank you for attending. And just a reminder, our next Tech Tuesday will be 2 weeks from today on February the 7th. We're going to cover PowerPoint, specifically how to adjust your master slide if you'd like to put in a graphic or to personalize it so that it captures all of your slides in one quick edit. And again, that's going to be on Tuesday, February 7th at 2 p.m. And you'll use the exact same internet link to